On September 28th, 2011, a 19-year-old university student named Maple Battaglia finished a late-night study session with friends, said her goodbyes, and walked toward her car in a campus parking garage. Moments later, gunshots shattered the quiet darkness.
Hi there, what's your emergency? I just wanted to report that I heard about 5 gunshots.
What's your emergency, sir?
I just heard gunshots.
When police arrived, they found Maple bleeding and barely alive. Shot multiple times and slashed across the head with a knife. She would die hours later in hospital. Her killer? Someone who claimed to love her but couldn't accept that she'd moved on.
This isn't an easy day for us. It's very bittersweet. We were just so proud of her. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her how much I love her.
Maple's father and mother, sister, and a family friend were in the waiting room. My sergeant said those words that every cop hates saying. I'm sorry I have to tell you, but your daughter is dead. Maple's mother grabbed the back of my head and pulled me down so that our foreheads were touching. And she screamed in my face, "Bring me vengeance."
This is the story of how obsession turned deadly, how surveillance cameras became silent witnesses to a meticulously planned murder, and how one family's grief transformed into a mission to protect others from the same tragedy. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe we need to remember victims and learn from their losses, please subscribe. Let's make sure Maple's story, and others like it, are never forgotten. Maple Battaglia was born near Mumbai, India, but her family brought her to Surrey, British Columbia when she was just a child. They named her after Canada's iconic maple tree, a symbol of their hope for her future in this new country. And Maple embodied that hope in every way. By the time she was 19, she was already juggling multiple dreams with remarkable grace. She was a health sciences student at Simon Fraser University, with her sights set on medical school, hoping to become a dermatologist. But Maple wasn't just academically gifted. She was creatively ambitious, too. She'd already landed a role in the teen comedy film Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Roderick Rules appeared in an episode of the television series The Secret Circle and worked as a model. She'd even become a finalist in a prestigious local modeling competition. Those who knew her described a young woman who was warm, intelligent, determined, and effortlessly likable. She was a straight-A student who lit up every room she entered. Her sister Rosaline would later say that even though Maple was the youngest in the family, she was the glue that held everyone together. Her father, Harry, called her his most precious jewel. Maple seemed to have everything ahead of her, a future bright with possibility. But there was a shadow in Maple's life, one that had been growing darker for months. Since high school, she'd been in an on-and-off relationship with a young man named Gurjinder Dhaliwal, who went by Gary. For years, the relationship cycled through breakups and reconciliations. Then, in the summer of 2011, Maple discovered that Gary had been unfaithful. Heartbroken but resolute, she ended the relationship for good. She was ready to move forward. Gary, however, was not. What followed was a pattern of behavior that should have set off every alarm bell imaginable. Between mid-August and late September of 2011, Gary called Maple more than 2,000 times. He sent her thousands of text messages. On one night alone, while she was out with a friend, he sent 300 texts. He began following her everywhere, tracking her movements, showing up wherever she went. He had friends watch her too, reporting back on who she was with and what she was doing. His jealousy had no boundaries. Just days before Maple's death, the situation escalated dangerously. Maple had gone to a Tim Hortons coffee shop with a male friend named Dilag Dillon. They were simply having coffee when Gary stormed in. Surveillance cameras captured him confronting them, demanding to know who Dillon was, accusing Maple of being with another man. He took a swing at Dillon. Maple tried to intervene, and Gary shoved her. The violence was undeniable. Maple called the police. Gary was arrested and charged with assault, a judge ordered him to have no contact with Maple whatsoever. She thought, perhaps, that this would finally be the end of it. She had no way of knowing that for Gary, it was only the beginning of something far worse. On the evening of September 27th, 2011, Maple headed to Simon Fraser University's Surrey campus to study. She met up with friends at the library, including Dylan. The surveillance cameras scattered throughout the campus captured her that night, smiling, laughing, completely at ease. She looked like any other student preparing for exams, focused and content. The cameras also captured something else. At 8:07 that evening, nearly 5 hours before Maple would be attacked, a white Dodge Charger with distinctive racing-style taillights entered the parking garage. The car circled slowly, methodically, as if the driver was searching for something. Or someone. At 10:08, the car appeared again near the library entrance. Just 14 minutes later, Maple and her friend walked past, heading toward the elevator. Someone was watching her. Someone was hunting her. And Maple had absolutely no idea. Shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning, on September 28th, Maple and 3 friends left the library together. They walked through the building, down the stairs, and out toward the parking garage. Everything seemed normal. They chatted casually, their body language relaxed. At the entrance to the parking area, the group split up. Maple headed toward her car, which was parked on the 3rd floor. Her friends went in a different direction. Maple was alone now, walking through the dimly lit garage. And this is where the cruel limitations of technology revealed themselves. The security camera monitoring that section of the parking garage was set on an automatic timer, programmed to slowly pan across the entire area in a continuous sweep. Just as Maple entered the frame, the camera rotated away from her. When it swung back moments later, the worst had already happened.
To see that camera turn away at the moment it most needed to be there was one of the most frustrating things to watch in this investigation.
At 1:04 in the morning, a resident living across the street from the university heard 7 sharp bangs in rapid succession. He ran to his window and saw a white Dodge Charger speeding away at a dangerous speed. He immediately called 911. Others heard the gunshots too, and within minutes, dozens of calls flooded the emergency dispatch center. Police officers arrived at the scene within minutes. What they found on the 3rd floor of the parking garage was horrifying. Maple was lying between 2 vehicles, surrounded by a growing pool of blood. She had been shot 3 times, including once in the stomach and once in the head. But the shooter hadn't stopped there. Maple's head had been slashed repeatedly with a large kitchen knife, which was found nearby, carefully wiped clean of fingerprints. The brutality was shocking. This wasn't just murder. It was fury unleashed. Somehow, impossibly, Maple was still alive. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her, then rushed her to the nearest hospital. Her family was called. They raced to be with her, but Maple's injuries were too severe. At 9:07 that evening, doctors pronounced her dead. She was 19 years old. The murder sent shockwaves through the community. A young woman had been gunned down on a university campus, in a public place, and whoever did it had disappeared into the night. Students were terrified. Parents were horrified. And investigators knew they were racing against time. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, led by Sergeant Kevin Jeffrey, took control of the investigation. They had one major advantage. Simon Fraser University's Surrey campus was covered by nearly 100 security cameras. If the killer was caught on film, they had a chance. Detectives began the painstaking process of reviewing hundreds of hours of footage. They tracked Maple's movements that night, identifying everyone she'd been with. All of her friends cooperated fully and were quickly ruled out as suspects. The investigation revealed that Maple had been comfortable and happy right up until the moment she left the library. There were no signs she felt threatened or afraid. No one appeared to be following her on foot. But the white Dodge Charger was a different story. Investigators traced its movements throughout the evening. The car had arrived hours before the murder, and had been circling the garage, clearly tracking Maple. After the shooting, a street camera captured the same vehicle speeding away at precisely 1:04 in the morning. The car's distinctive taillights allowed detectives to identify it as a 2011 model. They began contacting every person in British Columbia who owned or had rented that specific make and model. It was exhaustive work, but it paid off. Investigators discovered that a white Dodge Charger had been rented from an Avis car rental agency on September 25th, 2 days before the murder. Surveillance footage from the rental office showed 2 young men arriving to pick up the vehicle. The primary renter was a student at Simon Fraser University named Gursimar Bedi. He wasn't someone Maple knew well, but he was connected to her in one critical way. The second man with him was Gary Dhaliwal, Maple's ex-boyfriend. The same man who'd been arrested just days earlier for assaulting Maple and her friend. The same man who'd been ordered to stay away from her. Detectives now had their suspects, but they needed solid evidence. They brought Bedi in for questioning, hoping he would turn on his friend, but Bedi remained silent, refusing to answer questions. The breakthrough came from forensic investigators examining the rented Dodge Charger. Hidden under the hood, they found a spent shell casing. Tests confirmed it matched the caliber of the bullets that killed Maple. The connection was undeniable. On December 1st, 2012, more than a year after Maple's murder, police arrested both men. Gary Dhaliwal was charged with first-degree murder. Gursimar Bedi was charged with manslaughter and being an accessory after the fact. The investigation revealed a chilling picture of premeditation. Gary had purchased a gun and a large Bowie knife. He'd enlisted Bedi to rent the car for him, likely knowing his own name would raise red flags. On the night of the murder, Bedi had acted as Gary's eyes and ears, tracking Maple's location and reporting back. Gary had then driven to the campus and waited for more than 4 hours, watching, planning. When Maple finally left the library with her friends, Gary's rage intensified. He saw her hug Dylan, the same friend he'd assaulted days earlier, and something inside him snapped. He waited until Maple was alone, in a blind spot between the security cameras, and he struck. He shot her 3 times, and when she collapsed, he stabbed her in the back of the head 11 times. Then he fled in the rental car, while Bedi helped him escape, later driving the vehicle through a car wash in an attempt to destroy evidence. The path to justice was long and agonizing for Maple's family. The trial was delayed repeatedly, pushed back over and over for more than 4 years. Maple's sister Rosaline spoke publicly about the frustration and pain of waiting, of being unable to fully grieve while the case remained unresolved. Then, in March of 2016, just as the trial was about to begin, Gary Dhaliwal changed his plea. He admitted to second-degree murder. In court, prosecutors laid out the full horror of what he'd done, how jealousy and possessiveness had driven him to stalk, terrorize, and ultimately kill a young woman whose only crime was wanting to move on with her life. The judge sentenced Gary to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 21 years, one of the harshest sentences ever given for a single second-degree murder conviction in British Columbia. Maple's family felt both relief and frustration. They had wanted a first-degree murder conviction, which would have carried a longer sentence. They felt the justice system had failed to fully recognize the premeditated nature of Gary's crime. Gursimar Bedi's trial followed. He was found not guilty of manslaughter but convicted of being an accessory after the fact. He was sentenced to 22 months in prison, but with credit for time already served, he was released after just 18 months. The leniency shocked and outraged Maple's family. Rosaline described Bedi's sentence as a slap in the face, noting that he'd shown no remorse, had even smirked at them in court. The message it sent, she said, was dangerous. That you could help someone commit murder and face minimal consequences. In 2019, the family's pain was renewed when they learned Gary had been granted temporary release from prison to visit his sick grandparents. They felt betrayed all over again, forced to relive their trauma while the man who murdered their daughter was given privileges they felt he didn't deserve. But through all the grief and frustration, Maple's family chose to honor her memory by fighting to prevent other families from experiencing the same tragedy. They became vocal advocates against domestic violence, particularly within the South Asian community. Maple's mother Sarbjit and sister Rosaline have spoken at countless events, sharing Maple's story and urging others to recognize the warning signs of obsessive and controlling relationships. They've pushed for stronger legal protections for victims and harsher penalties for stalking and harassment. The community responded with overwhelming support. A bursary was established in Maple's name at Simon Fraser University for students in the Health Sciences program. The fund has raised over $100,000. The Maple Battaglia Memorial Scholarship for the Arts was created in partnership with Emily Carr, University of Art and Design. Her family has turned unbearable grief into a mission to protect others, ensuring that Maple's bright light, though extinguished far too soon, still shines in the world. Rosaline said it best when she reflected on their work. They're looking for Maple in everything they do, trying to fill the holes her absence left behind. The pain never truly goes away. Justice, as they learned, doesn't bring peace when the person you love is still gone. But perhaps meaning can be found in ensuring that Maple Battaglia is remembered not just as a victim, but as a talented, ambitious, beloved young woman whose death sparked a movement to save others from the same fate.